Hold on to your berets, folks, because the international diplomacy scene just got a whole lot spicier. The latest twist in the ongoing saga of global politics has left many scratching their heads, and others fuming with indignation. Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, decided to grace the Munich Security Conference with his presence. This was no ordinary appearance. It was a moment that would send shockwaves through the diplomatic community. But instead of handing out diplomatic niceties, he decided to chuck a grenade into the proceedings. His words were not just controversial, they were incendiary. His explosive statement, that any peace talks regarding the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine would not include, wait for it, Europe. Yes, you heard that right. The continent literally at the heart of this whole geopolitical mess was told to take a seat on the sidelines. This was a bombshell that no one saw coming. Naturally, this did not go down well. The room, filled with seasoned diplomats and political heavyweights, erupted in a mix of disbelief and anger. Reactions ranged from stunned silence to barely contained fury. The atmosphere was electric, charged with tension and incredulity. European leaders, many of whom had flown in specifically for this conference, were left wondering if they'd wandered into the wrong room. The sense of confusion was palpable. Had someone slipped something into their champagne? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? Was this a particularly unfunny joke? The disbelief was almost tangible. The answer, sadly, was a resounding no on all counts. This was no joke, no prank, no misunderstanding. This was real, and it was about to get messy. The diplomatic fallout from this announcement would be felt for a long time to come, and the repercussions were just beginning to unfold. Among those who were less than thrilled with Kellogg's statement was French President Emmanuel Macron. The French leader, known for his diplomatic acumen, found himself at the center of a brewing storm. Known for his diplomatic finesse and carefully chosen words, Macron reacted to the news with the subtlety of a runaway baguette truck. His frustration was palpable, and it was clear that this was not a situation he would take lightly. He immediately called for an emergency summit in Paris, inviting key European leaders to discuss this shocking turn of events. The urgency in his actions underscored the gravity of the situation. Sources say that Macron's usually calm demeanor was replaced by a fiery intensity, his voice echoing through the halls of the Élysée Palace as he made call after call. The stakes were high, and Macron was determined to rally his European counterparts. The message was clear. Europe would not be sidelined in a matter that directly affected its own stability and security. Macron's resolve was mirrored by other European leaders who shared his concerns. The audacity of the Trump administration to even suggest such a thing was seen as a slap in the face, and Macron, along with many of his European counterparts, was ready to deliver a strongly worded response. The tension was palpable, and the world watched closely. The diplomatic gloves were off, and the world waited with bated breath to see what would unfold at the emergency summit in Paris. The outcome of this high-stakes meeting could very well shape the future of international relations in the region. Now, you might be wondering what brilliant justification Kellogg offered for this diplomatic hand grenade. Well, hold on to your hats, because his reasoning was interesting, to say the least. Essentially, he argued that the United States, under the Trump administration, was pursuing an America First policy, and in this particular instance, America First apparently translated to Europe Last. Kellogg asserted that the United States, as a global superpower, had the right and responsibility to lead the way in resolving global conflicts. He suggested that Europe, with its complex web of alliances and often conflicting interests, would only complicate matters. In his view, a direct dialogue between the United States and Russia, unburdened by the pesky opinions and concerns of those pesky Europeans, was the best path to peace. Unsurprisingly, this explanation did little to quell the growing outrage across the Atlantic. If anything, it poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The reaction from other European leaders to Kellogg's statement and subsequent justification was swift and scathing. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, normally known for her measured approach, expressed her deep disappointment at the Trump administration's decision. She emphasized that the Ukraine conflict was a European security issue, and that any attempt to resolve it without European involvement was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski, never one to mince words, called the move a dangerous precedent that undermines the Transatlantic alliance. He pointed out that Poland, along with other Eastern European countries, was directly threatened by Russian aggression, and that excluding them from peace talks was not only insulting but also potentially dangerous. The message from Europe was clear. The United States could not simply dictate terms and expect its allies to fall in line. The era of unquestioning European deference to American leadership was over. Amidst the diplomatic uproar, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky found himself in a particularly precarious position. Caught in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war, Zelensky issued a desperate plea for a united European front against Russian aggression. He warned that excluding Europe from peace talks would only embolden Putin and further destabilize the region. Zelensky stressed that Ukraine's security was inextricably linked to that of Europe as a whole. He urged European leaders to stand firm against Russian aggression and to work together to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. His words served as a stark reminder that the stakes in this diplomatic standoff were incredibly high. It was not just about hurt feelings or bruised egos. It was about the future of Ukraine, the stability of Europe, and the very real human cost of conflict. Section 6. Rubio's reassurance, seeking common ground with Russia. In a surprising turn of events, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio attempted to calm the waters ruffled by Kellogg's controversial statement. Rubio, in sharp contrast to the Trump administration's previous stance, emphasized the importance of transatlantic unity and assured European allies that the United States was committed to working with them to address shared security concerns. He clarified that the United States was not seeking to exclude Europe from peace talks but rather to explore all avenues for dialogue with Russia. Rubio stressed the need for a united front against Russian aggression while also acknowledging the importance of keeping diplomatic channels open. He emphasized that the United States was committed to finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict and that it would continue to work closely with its European allies to achieve that goal. Section 7. A House divided U.S.-Europe relations at a crossroads. The controversy surrounding the exclusion of Europe from Ukraine-Russia peace talks exposed a deep rift in transatlantic relations. This exclusion was not just a diplomatic snub, but a significant indicator of the shifting dynamics between the U.S. and Europe. The Trump administration's America First policy, coupled with its often unpredictable and unilateral approach to foreign policy, had strained relations with European allies. This policy emphasized American interests above all, often at the expense of long-standing alliances. The decision to sideline Europe on such a critical issue further exacerbated these tensions, raising serious questions about the future of the transatlantic alliance. It highlighted the growing divide and the need for a reassessment of mutual commitments. European leaders expressed growing frustration with what they perceived as American disengagement from European security concerns. They felt increasingly marginalized and questioned the reliability of the U.S. as a steadfast ally. They argued that the United States could no longer be relied upon as a reliable partner, and that Europe needed to take greater responsibility for its own security. This sentiment was echoed in various European capitals, leading to calls for a more autonomous European defense strategy. The Ukraine crisis, therefore, became a pivotal moment in the evolution of U.S.-Europe relations, forcing both sides to reevaluate the terms of their partnership and consider the implications of a world where their interests were no longer aligned. This reevaluation could potentially reshape the geopolitical landscape for years to come. Section 8. The stakes could not be higher, peace hangs in the balance. The exclusion of Europe from Ukraine-Russia peace talks had far-reaching implications for the future of international security. The conflict in Ukraine was not merely a regional dispute. It was a proxy war between Russia and the West, a battleground for competing ideologies and geopolitical ambitions. The outcome of the conflict had the potential to reshape the European security architecture, redefine the balance of power in the region, and set a dangerous precedent for future conflicts. A failure to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict could lead to a wider war in Europe, with devastating consequences for the entire world. The stakes could not be higher, and the international community watched with bated breath, hoping that diplomacy would prevail and that a path to peace could be found. Section 9. What's next? the uncertain future of Ukraine and global security. As the dust settled from the initial shockwaves of Kellogg's statement, the future of Ukraine and the wider geopolitical landscape remained uncertain. The emergency summit in Paris, convened by a furious Emmanuel Macron, offered a glimmer of hope that Europe would present a united front against Russian aggression. However, the deep divisions exposed by the Trump administration's unilateral approach to foreign policy continued to cast a long shadow over transatlantic relations. The world held its breath, caught between cautious optimism and deep-seated anxiety, wondering what the next chapter in this unfolding saga would bring. Would diplomacy prevail, or would the world hurtle towards a new